In business today, three things to know. First, Africa's oil slick, how the price collapse is impacting the continent's largest economies and their currencies. Then, will Janet Yellen deliver a lump of coal to the markets? Why the Fed may change key language about its low interest rate policy this week. And will high-powered African-American actors and producers pull the plug on SONY following a hacking scandal that has gone out of control? Arise Exchange starts now. Hello, everyone. I'm Andrew Schmertz. It's good to be back in cold New York from warm Miami. But here I am. The slide in oil prices continues, and it looks like it's going to continue through the holidays as U.S. Brent crude prices drop below $56 a barrel on Monday to a 5-year low. While this is good for consumers in general, it is causing a near crisis for oil-producing countries, and this week we'll look at some of them that are getting smoked over oil prices. Today, we take a look at several countries in Africa. Oil has always been a significant part of Africa's gross domestic product, though less so in recent years. Oil represents about 16% of Nigeria's GDP. That's more than 50%, and more than 50% of Angola's GDP, about 3% of Ghana's GDP. So, as oil prices collapse, you'd think those economies will be hit, while others in Africa may actually benefit. Tony Carroll is vice president at Manchester Trade and joins us from Washington, D.C. Good afternoon, Tony.
Good afternoon, Andrew. It's great to be back.
So good to have you, as always. So how generally are low oil prices impacting Africa? Because we hear a lot about Russia, we hear a lot about the OPEC countries, but we're not really hearing a whole bunch about Africa right now.
Well, of course, it's going to have a differential impact based on the size of the countries who are producing oil. In Angola and Nigeria, those countries are going to be detrimentally impacted by a declining price. Smaller countries, but very dependent countries on petroleum, such as Equatorial Guinea, will be affected. But the new emerging producers, you mentioned Ghana, Nigeria, Tanzania, Kenya, Uganda, haven't really brought a lot on stream yet, and they're not going to be acutely affected in the short term. But long-term prospects are dimming because of declining price means there's going to be less opportunities or incentive for investment.
We have seen the Nigerian currency virtually collapse over the last couple of months. Directly related to oil?
Well, certainly related to oil. I think that Nigeria had pegged its oil price well above $70 per barrel. And now with the declining price, it's unable to intervene and defend the Naira as it has earlier in the year. And so you've seen a very steep decline, even a devaluation of the Naira. I haven't looked at the Kwanza in Angola. It's a less fluid currency, so I'm not sure how it's responding. But I suspect that the Kwanza will also in Angola, since, as you point out, about 50% of the Angolan GDP is based upon petroleum. Certainly we'll see a decline or at least some pressure to bring that price down as well.
When the Nigerian government rebalanced its GDP and announced that it was now the largest economy in Africa, it made a point of saying that it is far less dependent on oil than it has been in the past. How true is that?
Well, I mean, if you look at current prices, oil represents about 9.3% of its GDP, well below what it was at its height, it's 15 or 16%. And while that's true, you've seen enormous growth in services and in retail. What is the unfortunate reality in the oil price dilemma for Nigeria is 80% of government revenues really stem from oil production. That's really where the crunch is going to be.
Yeah, it's really the tax revenue. The tax base is still largely based on oil. What kind of power does Nigeria, for example, have in the oil-producing world? Because we always hear about OPEC. But what happens if they significantly cut capacity to try to drive up prices? Could that work?
You know, I mean, Nigeria is a complicated place. I think they've got a foot in and a foot out in terms of OPEC coordination. I think their government is building up to a big election, as you know, on February 14th. They're going to want to try to stay pretty liquid. So I see themselves as being more ambitious in terms of selling. And as we've discussed in this program before, Nigeria exports very little to the United States these days because shale has replaced that oil. Right. Now it's going to other markets, mostly in the Far East. And maybe they're a little less predictable over the medium to long term.
There are some places where low oil prices are going to help. South Africa is one of them. Why?
Well, South Africa is a consumer. They're not a producer of oil. It'll lower the factors of production costs. In fact, whether it's related to declining oil prices or not, South Africa saw an appreciable jump, about 5%, in its manufacturing products last month. So that's a good sign. And of course, consumers all across Africa are going to benefit. And African governments have historically subsidized fuel prices for their own people, and they're going to be spending less money on subsidizing fuel with hope they'll be spending some of that money on needed social development.
Okay, Tony Carroll, thank you so much from Washington, D.C. Appreciate it.
Good to be back.
Always.
Thanks.
Well, falling oil prices did rattle the markets today. Let's take a look at the final numbers. The Dow sliding down about 99 points or so, closing at 17,180. The S&P 500 closing at 1989. And the NASDAQ trading down to 46.05. Some of the top stocks we're watching today. General Motors says it's received yet another 64 claims for compensation for ignition switch defects in its cars in the past week. That brings the total to better than 2,300. GM closed at $31, down 57 cents. A technical glitch on Amazon's site in the UK allowed buyers to purchase thousands of products for just 1 pence last Friday. Amazon says it's going to review all the transactions, and if you were one of those people, they're going to come after you for that money. Amazon closing down $1.25. And pet supplier retailer PetSmart has agreed to be acquired for $8.7 billion. That's a lot of dog bones. In the largest private equity deal this year so far. The group of investors will pay $83 a share. PetSmart closing up $3.30 to just $80.97. And a look at commodities. Gold down $29 and oil down, as you could see, to $55.23 a barrel. Some other economic data today. Industrial production, which measures the output of manufacturers, utilities, and mines, grew 1.3% in November. And confidence among home builders declined in December by 1 point to 57. The National Association of Home Builders, Wells Fargo, reported readings above 50 signal that builders are generally pretty optimistic about sales trends. Well, on Wednesday, the U.S. Federal Reserve will release its monthly notes, which tend to be rather coy. But a key part to look for is whether it changes its outlook on interest rates. Michael Conway, CEO of Conway Wealth Group at Summit Financial, joins us now. Michael, welcome to Rise Exchange, and thank you.
Thank you for having me.
You know, we talked just a whole bunch about oil for a moment, so let me start with that. Why now will the price of oil dropping all of a sudden rattle the markets the way they have been?
Well, think about it. So many businesses and economies really rely on the price of oil. You mentioned earlier the price of oil is now just about at its 5-year low.
Yeah.
And we think back to what happened in 2008. Oil had risen up to 120, actually over 130 a barrel, I believe, and then dropped all the way down to about $38 a barrel. So the numbers you were talking about a moment ago are significant, where we are here close to the mid-50 range.
But won't this possibly help top-line earnings for companies as consumers maybe spend more money?
I think that's the good news. That's the good news part of the story, right? So as the middle class in particular has more money in their wallet here over the holiday season and going into next year, that is the good part of the story.
And the other good news is that it's not necessarily all about the global economy, isn't it? That the U.S. is producing so much of its own oil now. That's what we keep hearing, at least, that has helped drive down prices, and that's what's keeping prices low when OPEC in the past maybe had some room to cut capacity.
Yeah.
Any truth to that?
I think there is truth to that, and then we see the fight of the bigwigs here now between what OPEC is doing and what we're doing here with our domestic production. Who's going to blink?
Yeah.
What will end up happening, and will the U.S. gain a considerable foothold, which I believe it will. So that's an interesting piece.
It's kind of entertaining to watch, right?
It's a slugfest. We're going to see what happens here.
We have a horse in the race now. All right, so the Fed is going to meet, and we always try to decipher exactly what these notes are when Janet Yellen and the group come out. What do you think they're going to say on Wednesday, and is it going to look different than what they said last time?
So what's the term you used before?
Coy.
Well, we're gonna,
sometimes I use dense.
Well,
mix it up.
I think they're going to come out with probably considerable time. Right?
Okay.
So they want to raise rates, and they're talking about middle of next year, but a lot of it is data dependent. What happened? We don't see wage pressure. We're seeing what was happening in the oil markets. Domestically, things have improved considerably, but the partners we trade with around the globe, being the EU, Japan, China, significant slowdown. So how will that affect us here, and what will that do in turn to the Fed's decision?
And I guess they're going to say we really don't see any signs of inflation. And with oil prices pulling back, the consumer may be feeling less signs of inflation as well, and that's a key indicator of what they're looking for as well as wage pressure.
That is right. And so we're not really, so this additional move with oil coming down is a big key indicator. So wage pressure we're not seeing. Commodities have fallen dramatically. So we have commodities falling. So the bond market is telling us the markets are concerned. Commodities falling are showing a slowdown globally, and I think these are key things that they're going to be looking at.
Okay, so let's look at some of the economic data we have out there. For example, in the improving job market, what we've seen with home builders' confidence. Overall, is the fourth quarter of 2014 shaping up the way you think it would be?
Yes, well, I think, again, domestically, things are looking pretty good, right? So the unemployment numbers have improved, although we have to watch the participation rate. That has not improved.
The quality of the jobs is still kind of crummy.
They are, so that's an issue. But overall, domestically, auto sales are good. Real estate is vastly improved, so we've seen a lot of good signs here, but our trading partners are having trouble. So we'll see what that does to us going into the beginning of next year. But domestically, things are looking up.
And I don't want to put you on the spot, but with the change in Washington at all, what does that mean for the markets and for the markets generally?
Same thing as it did last year and the year before, and probably next year and the year after. What happens in Washington probably won't have much of an effect. I think it more comes back to business cycles than it does what our friends in Washington are doing.
And we're seeing a better business cycle right now.
Here domestically, we clearly are seeing a vastly improved number, so that's a good thing.
Michael Conway, founder of CEO Conway Wealth Group. Thank you so much for coming in.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Coming up, year 2 of enrollment for the Affordable Care Act. We'll have a look at where Obamacare stands. You're watching Rise Exchange. Stay with us.
Unrest continues in Ferguson, Missouri. Exactly what happened to Michael Brown Jr.'s memorial. The NFL fallout continues. Why does this video change the game? President Barack Obama met with congressional leaders today.
He does not need congressional approval to carry out the strikes.
The only language understood by killers like this is the language of force.
Do I want to have a draft? No, because I don't want to have war.
Hello and welcome to Arise America. I'm Debbie Turner-Bell.
Global. It's Monday, so it must be time for a new round of sanctions against Russia. Nigeria is open for business, and you are getting a handle on this situation. Compelling. Time for liquid lunch, things that make us want to drink. Could she have been separated at birth from, say, Grimace? All business.
Money's coming out of these countries, and that flow is part of what's driving the equity markets.
Entertaining money daily.
It's about reimagining.
Arise Exchange.
I think that people in America do care about what happens throughout the world.
Global warming is probably something that has to be addressed sooner rather than later.
From Somalia and the genocide there, and that's something people don't know about. They have no idea the brevity of that situation.
The first thing I think about when I think of Africa is like war and famine and disease.
And right now with the tsunami that happened or the earthquakes in, Japan, we always look out for other people.
Arise News, every culture, every angle.
Welcome back to Arise Exchange. It's year 2 for the Affordable Care Act, and a lot are hoping it's not deja vu. The administration is promising that many of last year's problems have been fixed. Now, the new deadline is this weekend, and to date, more than 6 million consumers have purchased health insurance through the Federal Exchange, many for the first time. Alan Murray, CEO of Care Connect at North Shore Long Island Jewish Hospital, joins us once again on the phone. Alan, welcome back to Arise Exchange.
Thank you very much for having me.
Let me start with this deadline confusion. It was tonight. I understand it's been moved to this weekend. Why?
So it was tonight. It still is tonight
for
healthcare.gov.
Okay.
It is moved to this weekend for New York State, and that's what they say is because of weather-related issues in November.
Okay, so once again, some confusion over the deadline, but for the most of the nation, it is tonight. When you compare this year to last year, how are we looking?
So I think we're doing great this year. I mean, obviously last year, it goes without saying, there were some bumps in the road. This year, not so much. This year, things have been going smoothly. I think people are getting online. They're making the phone calls, and the information is flowing. I think this year is going exceptionally well.
There are a lot of people who do not like this program, as you know, who are saying that people are seeing surprise increases in premiums. Are you seeing that?
Yeah, I think there are a lot of increases in premiums, and I think there's also been some decreases in premiums as well. And I think that's going to happen every year. Different products from different insurance companies are going to go up and down. And the lesson learned has to be make sure, as a consumer, every year you shop around and you look for the absolute best deal.
And is that easy to do on the federal website right now, on the Exchange?
I think it is. It is easy to do. I mean, you just have to get on there and do it. And they're seeing a lot of people right now who are not going on to the Exchange. They're just auto re-enrolling or passive enrolling. But once you go on there and you put your information in again, you have your password, you log in, the options all appear in front of you, and you can start making some great decisions.
And there are differences, though, right, between the federal exchange and for the states that run their own exchange. New York is one of those states that run their own exchange. Are the states still doing, I mean, it's been argued that the states have been doing a better job than the federal government.
Yeah, I think it depends on the state. I think you've had a lot of variation across the country. In New York, I think that its exchange has done very well last year and did very well and is doing very well this year. But generally, it provides the same type of information. It compares the plans, it compares the premiums, it compares how much you would pay once you access health care. And I think it's a very good tool for you to go in there and shop and understand it.
The Obama administration wants 9.1 million people signed up by next month, I believe, in 2015. They have about 6.7 million. What's holding these numbers back?
You know, I think right now there's, number one, we've only had a limited enrollment period as compared to last year. So it's only been up and running for a month. I think that's part of the reason why New York has extended it, and it's part of the reason why next year the open enrollment period is going to begin in October instead of in the middle of November. It just takes a lot more time, I think, for people to get used to this and to understand they have to go back on or they have to enroll for the first time.
So every year they have to re-enroll. Is that what goes on here?
No, every year if you're enrolled, you will be automatically re-enrolled in that plan. But if you want to take advantage of all the positive changes and competition between insurance companies, then you would have to physically go on there and make a new choice. And remember, it's not just taking advantage. Some of the assumptions that you made your decisions on the previous year may have changed. There may be new doctors in the network, hospitals may have left the network, premiums may have changed, and subsidies may have changed as well.
And finally, a lot of the economics are tied to getting younger people to sign up. And we know that last year, a disproportionate amount of older people signed up, which makes sense. Are we starting to see a real rebalance of that, do you think?
You know, I think it will be a while before we start getting the demographic data on that flowing into insurance companies like Care Connect. I honestly don't think it makes a difference. I think that, you know, we should be able to care for anyone who's out there, no matter what the premium or the age difference is.
Except older people are going to use more of the services. That's
They're going to
the
use more of the services, but then it's up to companies like Care Connect and hospitals like North Shore LAJ Health System to manage them better.
Okay. Alan Murray, thank you so much. Good talking to you again. Time now for our business tickers. Making headlines across the nation and the world. A hostage standoff in Sydney, Australia is over, but 3 people, including the gunman, are dead. Police stormed a cafe in downtown Sydney, ending a siege where the gunman had been holding an unknown number of people hostage for more than 16 hours. The motive is still unclear. Families of the Newtown, Connecticut shooting victims are suing gunmaker Bushmaster, a wrongful death lawsuit filed by the parents of 9 of the children who died in the attack at the Sandy Hook Elementary School 2 years ago. The suit against the manufacturer, distributor, and seller of the gun used in the attack asserts that the Bushmaster AR-15 rifle should not have been publicly made because they claim it was designed for military use and is unsuited for hunting or home defense. And while many teenagers spend their lunch breaks at school hanging out with friends, one New Yorker spent his lunchtime trading stocks and has now reportedly made $72 million. New York Magazine reports that 17-year-old Muhammad Islam from Queens has been trading stocks since the age of 9. He's gotten pretty good. He hopes to start a hedge fund with his high school pals next year when he turns 18. Now, later today, in an interview with CNBC, however, the teen trader said the dollar amount being reported is wildly inaccurate, but he declined to be more specific. Coming up, charging more during a crisis leads one CEO to become our favorite person of the day. You're watching Arise Exchange. Stay with us.
There is a reason Africa is called the new frontier. What was once potential is now an opportunity ready to be seized. Once revered for our resources, today's wealth lies in our people. People who build the cities that shape the future. People who know an idea in one place means business in another. A generation for whom technology means there are no borders, no boundaries. We are the new lions in a brave new world, kings of the urban jungle. And there's a bank that puts the world in our pocket and the future in our hands. UBA, Africa's global bank.
The fallout continues in Washington following Tuesday's scathing Senate Intelligence Committee report. Does this put Americans and America at risk?
Torture should have consequences. Torture is not a policy choice.
CIA managers and interrogators were uncomfortable with what they were being asked to do.
Widespread demonstrations are continuing for yet another night.
We are at a point of moral crisis. We are at a state of emergency for Black Americans here.
Hello and welcome to Arise America. I'm Debbie Turner-Bell.
Time now for our favorite person of the day, when we pick one person who grabbed our attention, not for the right reasons. Today, it is the CEO of Uber, Travis Kalanick, for cashing in on the chaos of a crisis. As Uber customers know, the on-demand car service turns on something called surge pricing during busy days in a particular area. Well, while the police were surrounding a cafe in Sydney, Australia, where a gunman was holding hostages, Uber was raising prices for those trying to flee the area. Prices quadrupled. And it was not done by mistake. Uber actually tweeted, quote, "We are all concerned with the events in the central business district. Fares have increased to encourage more drivers to come online and pick up passengers in the area." Well, now, shamed, Uber is apologizing and giving refunds to those who paid extra for the rides. And it's not the first time that Uber has used a disaster to price its service higher. During Hurricane Sandy on the East Coast, it did the same thing before being forced to change its policy by New York's Attorney General. Apparently, that policy change was not in effect down under. And so, Travis Kalanick, Uber CEO, is our favorite person of the day. Coming up, more fallout over the SONY hacking scandal. Mike Sargent is here to talk to us about it when Arise Exchange comes back.
I don't think that television news in the United States reflects the diversity of the world. I don't think it does a great job of even reflecting diversity of the United States.
When you are watching TV, you don't really see a lot of different cultures. There are plenty of other places that people might not even know about.
We are living in a global culture, and you cannot hide news that is happening when there's so much social media.
Arise News, every culture, every angle.
Apple unveiled new products today. Did it meet expectations?
Apple stock is up 20%.
The White House says it has proper measures to contain the spread of Ebola. This seems to be, in some ways, exploding. What are officials saying?
We remain focused on working with our partners on the ground to stop the epidemic.
Enhanced measures have been put in place in Africa and the United States.
This is hitting home in a very real way, and I think, we need to be concerned.
Hello and welcome to Arise America. I'm Debbie Turner-Bell.
Informative. The U.S. economy is on the right path, and the wizard of the Fed is leading the way.
We started our companies originally to create something that made a positive difference.
Compelling.
I became very successful, not allowing myself to be average.
Our favorite person of the day, when we pick one person who grabbed our attention, and not for the right reason. Yeah, he sort of lost all business. Investors came back from the long weekend tanned, rested, and ready to buy stocks. Entertaining money daily, Arise Exchange. So that massive data breach surrounding Sony Pictures just continues to dominate the headlines nationwide. This is better than the NSA breach, I think, frankly. The company warned several media outlets to stop publishing information released by hackers in that breach at the company 2 weeks ago. The hack unveiled rather racist and women-hating email exchanges between top Sony executives and producers that some say only prove what actor and comedian Chris Rock has been saying all along, that Hollywood is extremely racist. How will Black Hollywood respond? So let's ask our own Mike Sargent, our resident film critic and, of course, the host of Arise on Screen, which airs Saturdays and Sundays here on Arise. Mike, thank you for coming to Arise Exchange. It's great to have you here.
You too.
This is an enormously entertaining story. Let's be honest.
Yes, it is. It was better than some movies they put out this year.
Yeah. Well, that is for sure. If you're Sony, they should make a movie about this. Is it true they stopped production of movies, from what you understand?
Well, I don't know that they've stopped production of movies, but there was supposed to be this past weekend a junket with Kevin Hart in L.A., and it was canceled. And
probably because everybody's going to ask about this.
Well, the official letter was because we want to focus on the film.
No. Yes.
That was the official.
They want to focus on their damage control. You know, a lot of people in Hollywood, or a lot of people, critics of Hollywood, have said that it's always been liberal hypocrisy out of Hollywood, and you know, people send emails for all sorts of reasons, and they think it's private, but this is really kind of shining a light on this. And how does Hollywood and Sony respond? Because I got to believe that if they find emails at other companies, it's going to kind of look the same.
Well, I think if you looked at anybody's emails, you're going to find inflammatory things in there. I think that
I write like a dozen of them a day.
Okay, so you know what I'm saying. I think anybody, if their private thoughts or their private emails were released, it wouldn't shine them in the best light. But these are people who are hopefully held to a higher standard. You know, these are people who are the purveyors of entertainment.
Whenever I send an email, and this is what you're taught, you always wonder who else possibly could read it. Not that it's being hacked, but if you send something obnoxious, that person can forward emails, and it doesn't seem like any of that filter existed here at all, largely because I think a lot of these people just think they're untouchable.
I think so, and I think people forget. I think people forget that emails basically are not private. You know, there's something that can be, you know, from what I've heard, that this, I don't believe that this is South Korea or North Korea doing it. I think that it was.
You don't think this is retaliation for the Seth Rogen film?
I definitely don't think so. I don't think so.
Because that would be good on the North Koreans' part. That would be impressive.
That would be very impressive. But speaking to people I spoke to at Sony, I believe it's an inside job.
And that's interesting. Okay, so the question is, Chris Rock and other African-American actors are speaking out about this. Is this going to go anywhere beyond them just talking about this, or can they really use some influence here, along with people like Angelina Jolie, who is also thrown under the bus, to affect actual change and maybe fire some people?
Well, I think somebody's going to have to go down for this, and right now it's looking like Amy Pascal. But
she's on the rope. She's made a bunch of crummy movies to begin with.
She has, and I think that, you know, they have to have a fall person for this, you know, in order for them. What's happening right now is people don't trust their brand, and they're supposed to be launching an internet service soon. Who's going to want to give their credit card to a company that can't, you know, protect their own?
But beyond her possibly getting fired, is that going to be enough here? I mean, and do actors really have enough power here, or are they also worried about getting the next gig?
Well, I think it depends on how high you are. If you're an actor like Angelina Jolie or Kevin Hart, and you know you're a money maker for any studio, I just think that you can just stop making your pictures with Sony. And I think that will hurt Sony. And I think that probably the films that were leaked will hurt Sony. So I think Sony is going to be suffering for a while from this. And I think that, you know, with all that's going on with civil rights right now in this country, there's no way that this can't come to the forefront even more.
Okay, so how does Sony recover from this? I mean, the hacker says they have a whole bunch more to unload
on Christmas Day. And I think they will. I think that they're waiting. I think they're very smart. I think they're smart in letting people think it's North Korea, sending messages in broken English. I mean, it all plays like a movie. Like
where do you say it's an inside job? I mean, how do you
here's
come to
why.
that?
Here's why. Because Sony had to let a lot of people go this year, and the first people to go were IT.
Oh, okay.
So they're the people who have the most intimate knowledge of the system. So
other studios right now, we have about 30 seconds left, worried about if they're next and if they're doing something to clean up their act?
If they're not, they're foolish. I think most people or most studios, most companies are going to have to do something for security to make sure that it doesn't come out, because the damage is huge.
Okay, Mike Sargent, host of Arise on Screen. We'll see you this weekend. Appreciate you coming by.
Thank you, man.
Talk to you soon. Tomorrow on Arise Exchange, why the cost of meat this holiday season has some consumers thinking about going vegan. I'm Andrew Schmertz. Thanks for watching Arise Exchange. We will see you here tomorrow.